Well, that's not comforting at all, knowing that I'm about to go into a movie that is about a weird loner that has a weird fondness for walruses. Yup, I'm finally doing 2014's Tusk. Spoiler alert, while I may give you my opinion on the film, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description. I wasn't sure whether to be concerned or to laugh like Teddy did here, and yes, that is Haley Joel Osment playing Teddy. We open up to Wallace and Teddy recording a session for their podcast, and Teddy announces that Wallace will be traveling to conduct an interview soon after they laugh at the kid in the video. I still can't tell what kind of film this is. Is it a comedy, a horror movie, or simply a pet project? Either way, it's got my attention and the cast is the perfect mix so far. As Wallace enters Canada, a weird yet entertaining interaction with a friendly border agent welcomes Wallace to the country. He explains that his podcast is based off of him traveling and interviewing weird and unusual people. Then he describes it to Teddy, who won't travel to see these people firsthand. It seems like such a weird premise for a whole podcast, but after seeing some of the interesting podcasts out there, I wouldn't be surprised if someone was actually doing this. After he leaves the airport, he heads to the house of the kid from the funny video, but when he arrives, he gets a little something different from what he expected.
Hey.
I mean, the kid cut his own leg off with a katana. I can't imagine he was gonna last very long. That night, Wallace heads to a bar where he calls Teddy to tell him the news. At first, he wants to find the first flight back to the States, but after he realizes that he's already spent the money and they still need a show for the week, he decides to try and find someone else weird to interview. After he goes to the bathroom, he notices a handwritten letter on a notice board that was left by an old man that will exchange a room for help with chores and listening to his story. So, of course, he calls a number on the creepy paper that he found posted above a urinal, and that's how our story really begins. All great stories start in a bar bathroom, right? I can't think of any, but if you can, leave it in the comments. Once he arrives, he meets Howard, who is waiting for him with tea.
It's kind of spooked to get out of the car in the middle of nowhere. You know?
The only thing I'd say is spooking me is how he just waltzes through this man's house while touching everything. You don't just play another man's piano, especially if you don't really know how to play. Wallace tries to explain that he doesn't care about the room and he just wants to hear about the stories Howard has to share. This piques Howard's interest for a moment.
Oh, I see. You're a writer?
Well, I'm a podcaster.
What on earth is that?
I love how this guy seems to act like he's gonna be in the next best New York Times bestseller novel based off of his stories. Then Wallace says he's a podcaster. At least he doesn't tell him that him and Teddy will essentially just be making fun of his life during their episode. To Wallace's surprise, Howard's first story is actually extremely interesting, as it's about when he knew Ernest Hemingway and how they were a part of Operation Neptune back in the time of the Nazis. As Wallace gets drawn into Howard's story, he begins to look around at the other trinkets that Howard has placed all around his sitting room.
Whoa. So it's like a walrus spine?
No, it's more like a walrus cock.
Wallace's face pretty much says it all there. I'd be a little disturbed that he had just been stroking it, but on the other hand, it's just a cool thing to realize that it's in nature. Howard then moves on to a new story that explains when he was lost at sea and became very acquainted with the walrus. His ship had run into an iceberg that caused him to wash up on a shore where he found a walrus that saved his life. As Howard continues to tell his story, Wallace begins to nod off slowly as he continues to sip his tea.
It'll be all right, Mr. Tusk.
Obviously, we're leaning more towards psychological thriller or horror, but I still can't help but feel like this is more of a comedy than anything. I spent more time looking at the screen in weird awe at how this is playing out, but I love it. Wallace sees a flashback of when he was telling his girlfriend, Allie, about how he'll just pop up to Canada for the interview, then come straight back. She expresses her disdain for making fun of the one-legged kid from the original video, but Wallace can't turn down the opportunity to grow the podcast. As she tries to make him realize that he's lost the parts of himself that she loved, he wakes up to the sounds of classical music playing over a record. As Howard tries to explain that he passed out due to a spider bite on his foot, he also explains that a doctor came out to take care of him and had to take drastic measures to save his life.
Oh my God!
That's an appropriate reaction if ever there was one. So a doctor makes it there 30 minutes after a bite, and there is still enough time to stop the poison if they cut off his leg. That has to be some of the slowest moving poison I've ever heard of. I think it's time to start questioning Howard a little bit. Wallace asks about the doctor and whether he can make a phone call to his family, but Howard explains that the doctor is making his rounds and removed the phone so that he wouldn't be disturbed. I'm not sure what the doctors in Canada are like, but that wouldn't even fly as a lie. A doctor removing his patient's phones, telling his new amputated patient not to go to the hospital. That's just lazy lying.
Truly sorry for your loss.
Can he not hear him laughing? I would have dropped to the floor and crawled my way over to Howard by now. His little motorized chair wouldn't be able to outrun my belly crawl. That night, Howard sits Wallace at the dinner table, but Wallace is so tranquilized that he is completely immobilized. As Wallace begins to question everything, he questions if there was ever any truth to anything Wallace has said. As it becomes clear to Wallace that Howard is not all there and has his own agenda, Wallace begins to curse at his captor to let him out.
Let me out, you nutbag!
Oh, hell no. This guy has been wheelchair bound since before we met him. He just happens to get mad enough that his legs work all of a sudden. Nope, I'm out of there. Howard walks over to Wallace, who he slaps to shut him up before he walks back to his chair. Once there, he brings up the idea of what he's been working on. He's been working on creating a life-size walrus suit, and he wants Wallace to be a walrus once he wears the outfit. As Wallace realizes that he's not going to be getting out of there anytime soon, he begins to yell for anyone to help, but Howard simply mocks his cries for help. After dinner, we cut to a conversation Allie is having with someone. Honestly, as she releases the floodgates of emotion, it becomes clear that she's being abused emotionally. We can't quite tell who she's talking to, but there is a snippet of skin shown that is attached to a hairy little arm, so I have a feeling she's talking to Teddy this whole time. The next scene shows us a conversation between Wallace and Teddy that just confirms that Wallace is cheating on Allie whenever he goes out on the trips for the podcast. It's safe to say that this dude had something coming, but I didn't expect him to lose a leg. That's your ringtone. It's no wonder Allie can't stand you. I would chuck my phone out a speeding car window before I have to listen to that song again. As he wheels himself over to the phone as best as he can, Allie plugs her phone in and heads back to the bed where someone else is in it with her. She expresses that she's concerned because she hasn't heard from him in 3 days, but she can't hear that Wallace is trying to call her back at the moment. Wallace tries to explain what has happened to him, and he pleads with her to get help for him.
I don't want to die in Canada.
That's the takeaway from all of this so far. You've lost a leg and your biggest concern is whether you die in Canada. Back in Allie's room, she spills her heart out to her visitor that she can't live without them, and the visitor heads to the bedroom. It's none other than Teddy. No surprise there at all, but it's still a moment that needed to happen. What is kind of surprising is that Teddy sees his phone ring when Wallace calls, and he just watches it ring. Cold-hearted coworker. Wallace gets the information out in voicemails to both of them, but Howard comes up behind him and knocks him out. Howard explains that Wallace is going to have to be a walrus or he won't be anything at all. The next morning, Allie goes to the bathroom and checks her phone. Once she realizes what Wallace's voicemails mean, she rushes to Teddy, who she gets to listen to the messages. Back in Manitoba, Howard continues telling his stories of his history while he sews something together with a bloody needle. The more he explains how he came to be the mentally ill being he is today, the more we realize how he could have such a deep bond with a walrus. What is he even trying to turn him into? A stubby walrus? He has no feet flippers. Oh my god, what is that? Where did he get the extra skin? This is terrifying, and I never plan on going to Manitoba in my life. I definitely laughed though, I can't even lie about it. Allie and Teddy land in Canada, and after searching everywhere, they end up having to just go straight to the police. The police promise that they will take it seriously, but it doesn't seem promising. They do mention someone that had been looking for legless bodies, and Allie takes the number of the man. Back at Howard's house, he decides the best way to make Wallace feel more like a walrus is to make him learn to swim in his new body. As he is pulled into the water by the chains, he ends up sinking like a rock, but he discovers that he isn't Howard's first attempt at making Mr. Tusk.
He is
so close that I can almost smell his
Oh god, this is who they're supposed to trust to find Wallace. And yes, that is none other than Johnny Depp. That alone gives me a little more confidence, but this guy looks like he might have been from the same mental institution as Howard. He's probably just mad that Howard took something of his, and once he gets it back, he'll just walk off into the sunset. Guy gives them insight on Howard's MO, and they find out that he has killed 23 other people to try and attempt the same experiment. After explaining what he does to the bodies, Guy then explains a time that he thinks he met Howard. He actually questioned him 2 years prior, but Howard did not come across as mentally stable at all. He even introduced himself by the doctor's name he mentioned earlier. Back in the present day, Guy tries to explain that he failed to save someone back then, but he refuses to assume things anymore. They end up trying to follow in his habits to find out where he would have gone, and they come across the convenience store Wallace stopped at to get a drink. Awesome bit of trivia. The two store clerks here are actually Harley Quinn Smith and Lily Rose Depp. Harley is director Kevin Smith's daughter, and Lily Rose Depp is Johnny Depp's daughter. It's the perfect bring your kid to work day kind of gig. It's here that we come across the paper pad that Wallace used to write down the address, and Guy finds out where to go from here. Back at Howard's house, he's making progress in using Wallace as a way to remember Mr. Tusk, but that means he remembers the terrible thing that he did as well.
Man feeds on the meat and sinew of the helpless.
And of course, a boat arrives right after this. It's the Mist all over again, but hopefully he doesn't feel the need to completely relive his memories with Wallace. Although Wallace probably has no hope for ever going back to a normal kind of life at all at this point. Just a little bit away, Guy, Teddy, and Allie arm themselves after they discover Wallace's rental car disposed of in a pond. Meanwhile,
You will fight me, Mr. Walrus, or you will die!
what am I watching anymore? This has gone straight to comedy again now. I can't tell if I'm supposed to be taking this seriously. As Teddy and Allie hear Wallace yelling, Wallace finishes Howard with his mighty tusks, and he embraces the self-defense side that makes him feel like a true walrus. As Allie and Teddy come face to face with Wallace, they see that he has lost his humanity, and it's up to Guy to put him out of his misery. As Guy raises his shotgun, we cut to black. Once we return, it's a year later, and we see Teddy and Allie walking to an animal sanctuary with something wrapped in newspaper. I would almost think it would be more cruel to keep him alive at this point, but of course they keep him in a little enclosure and throw a mackerel down to him. During a flashback, we see Allie talking to Wallace about how animals can cry, and that's what helps remind us that we have a soul. I can't take it seriously, but the meaning behind it is there, and it's a nice touch still. And that's it. This was an absolute ludicrous idea, and it was even more ludicrously executed. I love it. I shouldn't have doubted a thing when I saw that Kevin Smith directed it, but when you hear about a man trying to turn people into walruses, you get a little skeptical. Not anymore. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.